Coffee is a very special gift from Hashem, especially after you fly overnight from Chicago and just basically land earlier in the day. Don't sleep that much when you're flying with 3 kids. And bless it upon all of us, Be'ezus Hashem, and many more. And it's a huge schus to be back. It's a huge feeling of renewal and moving into a new period of time. After Pesach, everything changes, the energy changes, the weather is on its way to changing. Can't expect so much from London, you know. But the weather is changing, and the world is coming alive. The energy in nature, things are coming alive. And as much as the world is coming alive, our inner world, we're all Adam Katan, Olam Katan, each person is a microcosm of the whole world, we're coming alive. So it's a new time to be able to feel that energy and to wake up to that. And I can't think of another time in my life, my short little life, our short little lives, all of us, can't think of a time where we needed to hold on to that energy of a new beginning, of hope, any more than this moment on a Yom HaShoah, where we look around the whole world and we know these feelings, we felt these feelings before, the rising tide of changing public sentiment, feeling misunderstood, feeling hounded, threatened, curtailed in our capacity to do what we want to do, which is to fill the world with light. That's the only thing any Jew ever really wanted. And it's a chaval, because they won't allow us, right? And so it can be so easy and I would say seductive, tantalizing, the desire to just give up. The desire to just give up. What can we do? Well, one person against the whole world, right? And more so now than ever before, I think we have to absolutely hold on to the fundamental essence of the Jewish energy, which is hope, which is emunah, which finds it completely irrelevant what's going on in the world outside to what my personal avodah is and needs to continue to be. It's two completely different cheshbonos. The world will do what the world needs to do. But the emes, the truth, thanks so much for coming, the truth does not stop being true just because the whole world is screaming a falsehood, a lie, misunderstanding the fundamental nature of what this is all about. What this was always ever about, where things came from, where things are, and where things are absolutely going to be. As Hashem, we have to hold on tight now more than ever before. And so I feel like it's a tremendous chus to jump into this next phase of our learning together after spending 3 weeks on the Hakdama before Pesach, the introduction to the sefer, and now starting the actual sefer itself in a time frame of Chodesh HaAviv, in the springtime, when again, the energy of spring and renewal and awakening is not just happening outside of us in the natural world, but inside of us as well. If we are awake to it, if we can tap into it, we can start, absolutely make a new beginning for each and every one of us to find that kernel of hope, even though we feel like we're sinking down into the depth of an ocean of despair and darkness, and to be the light, to be the light, to do whatever we can to be the light, which, as we mentioned in previous shiurim, we already are. And it's just a matter of revealing that, which all of us already have. So let's take a look at the first page over here, which you'll notice if you flip the page over, is in a different format than the rest of what we're going to be learning. And the reason is he begins each chapter with a quote from another sefer. Okay, so that's Rav Kluger's derech in all of his svarim that I've seen, and the same is true for Yichud HaHisbodedus, which might have been one of his first, or the early writings that his machon, his publishing house, produced. And they always begin first with a quote from a different sefer. And so here we're going to learn just a short paragraph from the Sefer Ikrim. And it doesn't get more axiomatic or ikari, which is what ikarim is, right? Fundamentals. It doesn't get more fundamental than this paragraph. For all times, and particularly for this moment in history, that we're privileged and charged with bearing as a nation and as individuals. Says the Heiliger Rav Kluger Shlita, quoting from a much earlier sefer, the Sefer Ikrim. Kina kosuv avas Hashem Yisbarach el Yisrael b'shem cheishek. The Torah describes the relationship between Hashem and Am Yisrael, or more accurately, the love between Hashem and Am Yisrael, b'shem cheishek, using the word cheishek. How would you translate the word cheishek? What does it mean to have cheishek for something? Desire. Yeah, I think that's a generally the standard translation, the word cheishek. The Torah tells us that Hashem has cheishek for this nation, desire for Am Yisrael. Amar, the pasuk says, Hashem speaking through Moshe, Chashak Hashem bachem v'yivchar bachem. Hashem has desired you and He has chosen you. V'shem cheishek. What does it mean, cheishek? Any other word could have been used, and these words are used in different contexts. Hashem loves Am Yisrael. Hashem has a relationship with Am Yisrael. But this word cheishek is a very specific connotation. V'shem cheishek ye'amer. This word cheishek is used, employed in the context of alaflogas ahava blitam. When we're describing the bond between two people that transcends reasoning, we're not able to bring it down into like a practical black on white, pen to paper kind of analysis of why this person and this other person should work. It's not a business transaction where we can figure this thing out intellectually. There's just cheishek. There's no real way of explaining it. There's just a natural draw that these two people have for one another, or if we want to abstract it a little bit more, outside the context of relationship between people, you find it most specifically, and Rav Tzadok mentions this, I mentioned this in the first year that I gave on Sefer Sichas Haran, which is also an ongoing series that we've had for a few years now. Baruch Hashem, we're privileged to learn that Sefer. Rav Tzadok talks about it in the context of tasting food. Taste is something that's completely beyond understanding. The mind can't grasp why it is that one person has a particular knack or a desire for vanilla ice cream and the other person has for chocolate ice cream. They can't explain it. Why is it that every single time this person goes, they order, a bagel with cream cheese, and this one orders something else? It's cheishek. It's beyond the person's ability to really explain it. It just is. This person likes vanilla. This person likes chocolate. This person likes coffee. The other person likes tea. Stam. Kacha. This is just the way it is. Let's say it in another nusach. Why is it that some people choose when they go to university and they get their high school diploma, they move on to uni and they're trying to go for a certain master's in a certain area, working toward it? They call it a master's here? Yeah, master's degree. So one person chooses biology and one person chooses history. Why? Why? Like, how do you understand that? These are two perfectly good fields for a person to want to learn more about, to work in this particular field or that particular field. And the answer is cheishek. The answer is there's something so deep inside the spiritual makeup of this particular person that she is drawn to history. Kacha, that's just the way it is. They have a cheishek to learn that. They have a cheishek to eat this particular food. This one has a cheishek to learn something else, to eat something else. And in relationships, of course, this is really the essence of the relationship. Everybody always talks about proofs to believe in God. And maybe there's a place for that. Hashem gave us brains. Hashem wants us to be able to articulate the essence of why it is that we're not Muslims, which is a really important question to ask these days, right? Why are we not Muslims? Muslims are totally monotheistic. What do we have to explain clearly where the boundaries of our faith end and where the borders of another faith begin, and why it is that we hold tight, not simply because we have a Masorah from generation to generation, which is, of course, an incredible pillar of our faith. We just had Pesach. We say Elikeinu v'Elikei Avosenu. It's certainly the God that it was passed down through the generations to us by our fathers and their fathers before them, and so on and so forth throughout the generations. But it's also Elikeinu. A person needs to know, needs to be able to explain, and so there's room for proving intellectually God. But to me, sometimes it feels like, would a person ever go over to a person that's been married to a particular woman, to his wife, for 30, 40 years, and say, prove to me that this is really your wife? Prove it to me. Like, what do you mean, prove it? Like, she's my wife, I love her. What do you mean? It was clear to me. Now, as Hashem, everyone should find their zivik b'karv mamish. People are in dating, people are in different stages of life here. When you find the one, if the reason that you feel it's the one is because you have some kind of list, and this person checks the boxes, and like, okay, intellectually it sounds like a good, that's the level of a business deal, and there's no heart in that. There's no soul in that. In a certain way, this is how relationships used to be. 100, 200 years ago, the parents just got together. It sounded good, made sense on paper, and like they didn't even have to meet each other because, like, who cares? Like that's just the extra stuff. Today, cheishek, it's got to be heart and soul. On the contrary, if a person can explain why this is the one they've settled for, then it's not so deep. Something's missing. Because although the intellect plays a huge part of it, but the essence of it needs to be the cheishek that we feel. That a person feels for this person. That's just the way it is. I can't explain it. So on a certain level, of course, we can explain why we believe what we believe. But also, it's just like, I'm in love with Hashem. I don't know. How do I know that this is because I'm in love with Him. And I've chosen Him in the way that He's chosen me. And I adore Yiddishkeit. I just adore it. I couldn't imagine not wearing tzitzis every day. I couldn't imagine not lighting, for the women's mitzvahs, Shabbos candles. I couldn't imagine not sitting by a Pesach Seder. I'm in love with it. I have to prove it to you, because it's a relationship. It's not a theological, theoretical, philosophical endeavor where I can abstract it to ideas, and this makes the most sense on paper. It's far beyond that. That's true too, of course. It's always going to be true about the truth. And it's certainly true about the Torah. But it's much deeper. And that's what cheishek is. V'shem cheishek amar la flagas ahava b'li tam. Cheishek means when there's so much love that it's without a reason. K'lemar afal pishu maitzeh acheres na'em mimena. This is so deep. Even though, in terms of the paper understanding of the relationship, there are others that make more sense. Sometimes you have this. Does a person really think when they get married to a particular person? We spoke in a previous year how it's the way that they praise one another. But do they really think that there's no better looking person? Let's say if that's a particular strong element, that there's no better balmidos, that there's no better learner. Do they really think that this is the most perfect person in the world? No, of course not. But that's irrelevant, because it doesn't matter that there are more perfect people, because it's not about perfect people. It's about perfect person for me. That's what it is. And on that level, we can only speak the language of cheishek. Again, if we're approaching it from the other aspect of what the ingredients that go into making up the relationship, so then how are you going to figure this one out? How are you going to decide which person to settle with, to build your eternity with, to pass on your spiritual DNA to bring the torch of Avram Avinu and pass it along to the next generation? How are you going to decide which person that is? Because there could be any one of a million people that we'd have to analyze and really take a look at every possible suitable suitor that there is in the whole world, and then make a really calculated decision. If that's all there was to shidduchim, if that's all there was to a zivuk, to a relationship. But Baruch Hashem, that's not all there is. Otherwise, no one would ever get married. People would sit and they would analyze. Now, some people do this, but people would sit for decades and decades and decades and make sure to go out with every single possible suggestion that anyone could have even imagined suggesting. And then, unfortunately, for some of those people, it's not relevant anymore, Nebuch. But it's, Baruch Hashem, that's just not the way things go. Because Hashem implanted within us an inyan of cheishek. And when it's the one, it's just the one. It's not, our brains are no longer thinking about all the other stuff. It's just right. Is it perfect? I don't care. It's perfect for me. Also, my wife is perfect, aside from that. But she's perfect for me. I don't care that it doesn't matter. Perfect for me. That's the relationship between Hashem and Am Yisrael, and this is the reason that he's using this paragraph, this teaching, as a preface to the first chapter, which teaches about the preliminary fundamental awareness that a person needs to have when walking into hisbodedus. It's the basic. It's the gateway. If a person doesn't have this realization sitting at the like the core of the core, or the foundation of their spiritual consciousness, very difficult to get into hisbodedus properly. Because we still come in with our calculating mind, and then we have all kinds of doubts. Who am I that Hashem should listen to me? Maybe I'm not on the madrega, maybe I had this, that. The conversation doesn't begin. Or we approach the relationship with Hashem through a completely different paradigm than the one that's necessary, because we're not speaking the language of relationship. So it's very difficult to pour out our heart to HaKadosh Baruch Hu when we're still coming with our rational proofs to God. So then I walk into the Daled Amos of a concept, not of a living, vibrant, feeling, emotive being that's in love with me. And that therefore I can feel totally comfortable bearing my soul to, which is the whole thing of hisbodedus, as we've mentioned in the introductory shirim, and now we're going to get more into it beprata. So let's look back inside. Koloimar, afal pishu moitzi acheres na mimena. Even though a person will theoretically find another girl or another boy who's more polished, who's more beautiful, who's more accomplished, whatever we look for, who's more responsible, etc., all the different milas, makes no difference. The essential love that exists between Hashem and this thing called Yisrael, which is so much more than what we call Klal Yisrael. Aside from the fact that usually when we use that terminology, Gesundheitsstaat, we think of like the frum world, right? Which is a tiny fragment, a tiny percentage of all the Jews out there, some of whom don't even know that they're Jewish. And even if we managed to identify all halachic Jews that are left at the very, very end of time, this would still represent 2 shvatim out of 12, the 10 shvatim of which we don't even know where they are. There's one theory I read online that like 80% of the whole world is actually Jewish. That like maybe there's some kind of thing where everybody else, somehow there were accidents along the way, nobody knows, but somehow like the essential ruling castes of every single major nation, India and Africa and the Pashtuns and Afghanistan, millions and millions and billions of people really are just, they're our brothers and sisters, and that will be the Great Awakening. Like, hey, it's just us. Okay, I don't know, whatever, that doesn't really fit with the Navi in many places, but it's an interesting theory. But imagine how, like, Klal Yisrael is vast. And Klal Yisrael isn't even just the totality of the Jewish nation in a particular generation, but it's rather this collective spirit that has come down in each generation from the beginning of time, even before the beginning of time, Bishvil Yisrael Shenikru Urashis. And again and again and again in each generation, that generation's Jews embody this very same spirit. And Hashem loved that. Happens to be that each and every one of us are wicks for that flame. But it's the flame that he adores. It's the essence of who we are. The basic, most fundamental level of our identities. Identity is a really important thing today. People are very confused around identity. Gender identity, that's one aspect of it, and there's certainly something happening in that regard in the world at large and in the Jewish community as well. A lot to speak about there, to wonder about, to think about. But just generally, like, what does it mean to be a Jew? What does it mean to be a Yid? Who are we? Every person wants to know today. Who are we? And we try to get clarity into this very deep and confusing sugya by fitting into this box and fitting into that thing and affiliating with this one and getting involved with that organization. These are things to help us feel like we have an identity, like we fit. And there are so many layers of our identities. We are citizens of a different country that isn't particularly connected to our faith tradition, but we're really, let's say we're British or we're American, but we're also Jewish. We're not quite sure what Jewish means. Us, Baruch Hashem, in this room we know, but I'm talking in general. What does it mean to be a Jew? Identity. How do we define that? We have different roles, different aspects of our personalities. We're sisters, we're mothers, we're daughters, we're friends. We're part of this shul and not part of that shul. Like, what are our identities? All of these different elements come together to make up the puzzle piece that is us. But like, who are we at our essence, at our core? When I wake up in the morning, what's the first thing that I think about when I think about the word ani, which is the very second word that we say every morning? Modeh ani lefanecha. But first, ani. What does that mean? And if a person doesn't understand that with total, utter clarity, their whole day, even if it's a very productive day, if it is flowing forth from a source that isn't the most fundamental source, it's still going to be a secondary day in terms of their ambitions. Because even if, again, their ambitions are noble ambitions, even the most noble ambitions, but if those ambitions aren't flowing forth from the deepest hasaga, the deepest perception of what my identity is, there's going to be something missing. It's not going to be deep enough. Even if a person spends their whole day learning, or their whole day davening, or their whole day doing chesed. But if those still flow forth from an external shade of identity of what it means to be a Jew, still not the deepest. And I'll give you just an example. Let's say a tzaddik, mamash a tzaddik. Imagine a person, or a tzaddikas, a person who spends the whole day serving Hashem. And the premise of their serving Hashem is that they are a Jew and therefore obligated to keep these particular mitzvahs for the purpose of earning schar in olam haba. That's their concept. They're going to get tons of olam haba. And it's super deep and special and precious and like halavai. That we should, touch even a tiny nakuda of that. And it's still not flowing forth from the deepest level of identity. Because the truth is that where it should be coming from is not that, okay, I am a Jewish person and I'm trying to manifest individual greatness, let's say gadlus ha'adam, as is oftentimes mentioned in the Musar Sfarim, for the purpose of gaining olam haba of one kind or another. Still not deep enough. And listen carefully to this is very important. At the deepest level, my identity is not my identity. At the deepest level, I'm part of this thing called Knesset Yisrael, called the Jewish spirit. And I'm one of many, but those many are one. And we are here as a collective throughout history, and certainly in each generation, to accomplish a mission on behalf of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. It's a completely different approach. And in this sense, it's not about taking, it's about giving. In this sense, it's about a relationship. I'm not going to reiterate all the stuff that we mentioned in the previous year. We went through this already. It's a completely different hasaga. So you can have two people doing the very same things, but if it's flowing forth from this level of awareness, it's a whole different world. It's a whole different world. There's no aspect of quote-unquote ego. It's much deeper than that. And by the way, humility doesn't mean in this context, and we'll speak about this I think later on in the sefer, humility doesn't mean to say, I'm nothing, I'm just a spark in an ocean, in a flame, I'm just a drop in an ocean. On the contrary, when we can hold these two things together as one, that at my deepest core identity, this is what I am this flame that's really part of this gigantic torch that is itself the embodiment or the presence of Hashem and Hashem's way of thinking and the spirit of divine goodness and clarity and emes and sensitivity and really just goodness in every way, shape, and form, which is what our nation embodies as Rachmanim and Baishanim and Gomli Chasadim. That's our nation's nature. And that's the flame. But I'm also a unique wick. And the uniqueness of my particular wick in terms of my background and my circumstances and my talents and abilities and struggles and challenges and circumstances and mistakes, all of the stuff that comes together to make up the world that is each and every one of us, that's the lens through which Hashem's light is shining in a unique way. And so all of my ambitions of the rest of the day, they're certainly unique to me, but it's flowing forth from much deeper of a level of awareness. And this is where we need to move ourselves to. This is where we need to move our children to, our teenagers toward, to begin to identify with the deepest essence of what it means to be a Yid, the deepest of the deep. And then rooted in that, boom, soar, be yourself. Find a way to use every single avenue of your life to reveal that energy. Be the Yid that no Jew before you could have ever been and no Jew after you will ever be. Be the Yid that you need to be, but recognize that it's not about you. It's not about me. It's about something so much bigger. And so the sense of achrayus is that much deeper. The sense of possibility is that much deeper. We're all one. We're all one in this room. We're not separate people. We're all one at the root. We carry the very same spirit within our hearts and souls. But then we're different people. Each of us with our own tafkid that flows forth from this shared tafkid. Yeah, is this clear? So let's go back inside now. This awareness that he's beginning the sefer with this quote from the sefer Ikrim, is the most fundamental awareness that we need to know. At my essence, I am desired by Hashem. Why? For no reason, so to speak, right? Because it's cheishek. And like I believe it was the Mittler Rebbe of Lubavitch who said in Yiddish, Mefrek nish kein kashes of a taiva. You don't ask questions about a desire. Person has a desire. Again, that word kacha in Hebrew, it just is. I can't explain why. Kacha. It's beyond our limited intellect. Perhaps not beyond Hashem's intellect, which is infinite. So maybe Hashem has the reason, quote unquote, but it's certainly beyond us. But it's irrespective of how much I feel I deserve it or not deserve it. It just is. Hashem, it's like just accept it, you know. Hashem desires us. Hashem is chashak Hashem b'chem. V'chein avas Hashem yisbarach es Yisrael hu cheishek b'litam. This is the desire that Hashem has for this thing called Knesset Yisrael, which again all of us embody in the deepest layer of our identity. V'chal sefer shir ashir miyusan al chuki zeh. I'm sorry, al chikui zeh ha-cheishek. Asher bein Hashem yisbarach v'Knesset Yisrael. The entire Shir Hashirim is based on this axiomatic principle. What's called a chok. Like, it has no reason. There's chukim u'mishpatim. The mishpatim, we can understand why these are important rules for a functioning society. The chukim, lo yodea. It's just what Hashem wants. The whole Shir Hashirim is based on this. Amar, ki am kadosh atal Hashem alekecha. The pasuk says, because you are a holy nation to Hashem your God. V'chabachar Hashem alekecha liyas lela am segula mikol ha'amim. Hashem has chosen you among all the nations to be His treasured people. Asher al pnei adama, among all the nations of the world. And here the pasuk goes on to really spell this out. Loi mirubchem mikol ha'amim chashak Hashem b'chem. Hashem didn't desire you because you are the most numerous among the nations, meaning not just in numbers, but you're the most impressive, you're the most magnificent, you're the best looking nation, you're the tallest, the strongest, the most successful, the most etc., etc. No. That's not why Hashem chose us. We're compared to a segula, just like today we have skulas, right? What's a skula? A skula, if you daven this particular thing at this particular time, you do that in this place for this Indian, it works, right? Why? Did anybody ask why a skula works? No. Because that's what it is. It's a skula. This is just what it is. Hashem revealed through certain tzaddikim that there are certain things that we can do that work, that have an impact in the higher realms. Why? Don't know. That's why it's called a skula and not an eitzah, piece of advice. So many of the tzaddikim say, Rabbi Nachman says this explicitly also, this is the deeper meaning of what it means, that we are to Hashem an am segula. On a literal level, we translate it as a treasured people. We are Hashem's treasured nation. But based on this deeper understanding, it's a whole different way of looking at it. We are Hashem's segula. Meaning, just like a segula is without a reason, it's completely beyond us why Hashem chose us. There's no reason we can give. Not because we're the most impressive. We're just like a segula, beyond any way of explaining it. Hashem didn't bind His spirit with this particular people because of their kamos, because of their quantity, not in any sense. Because again, like the pasuk says, it wasn't because of the quantitative nature of of how impressive we are. The gam levar, and then the psukim go on to explain that also it wasn't either because of the quality. Because you can say, okay, quantitatively we're not that impressive, but what about the qualities that we have? Says the pasuk, it's good, but it wouldn't be enough. It wouldn't be enough. It would still be a limitation. It would be a reductionist approach to the relationship to give any reason for it, because it would limit it. It would make it conditional on those reasons that may exist in one generation but might not exist in the next generation. Might exist in one Jew, might not exist in the other Jew. But the cheishek is the same. Says the pasuk, Amar b'makam acher, the pasuk says in a different place, Loi b'tzid kascha v'yosh levavcha. And Hashem hasn't either chosen us because of our righteousness or because of the straightness of our hearts. Ki am she'oref ata. The Jewish people don't have all the best qualities in the world. We're described again and again as a stubborn nation. And Hashem, through the Nevi'im, is telling us again and again, I can't understand it. Cows follow their owners. Yadeshar kainai. Right? The oxen know who they need to listen to. But my nation forsakes me b'liyoil, without time, without reasons. Again and again and again, we're bashed. There was no greater critic than the Jewish nation, than Tanach. And that's where all the other nations got they took it from there, the Christians particularly, because they look, the whole Nach is busy bashing us. But you know what? They very conveniently leave out all the psukim where after HaKadosh Baruch Hu highlights all of our faults again and again and again and again. From the Torah, through the Nevi'im and the Ksuvim, Hashem says, and despite it all, uv'chol zois, Hashem says, I'll never have disgusted you, despised you, cast you away to destroy you. Again, b'shavu banim l'kvulam. I mean, how is it that intellectually honest people can read parts of Tanach and then completely ignore the context, completely ignore the greater narrative, completely ignore the tale and the relationship within which sometimes, Hashem says, like, listen guys, you got to get your act together. Because we have a nature, this am kshei oref, but the cheishek is always there. Can never do away with that. That's the message of Tanach. Not the message of Hashem rejecting the nation that He chose because they rejected Him. Any person that reads Tanach that way, there's no critical thinking. There's no what do they call it? Reading comprehension. Like there's no understanding of like really the basic narrative structure of Torah, Nevi'im, and Ksuvim is this. We are an imperfect people. We are not particularly impressive in any way. Not in kamos, like he said, not in quantity, and not either in quality. Essentially. Now Hashem imbued within us certain quality. But before that, like we're not special. And that non-specialness comes out again and again and again. But none of that does away with the way in which HaKadosh Baruch Hu maintains a relationship with His people and promises them that despite the destruction of the first Beis HaMikdash that was a result of their Averos, despite the destruction of the second Beis HaMikdash that was a result of their Averos, despite the long and turbulent Gullus that is a direct response to their continued inability to pull it together, it won't matter. Hashem will bring us back. Not for our sake, but because he is cheishek banu. Because he desires us. And in that sense, I don't think it's a stretch for a person to sum up the entirety of Torah. The entirety of Torah, including the mitzvahs and including all of the different narratives within Tanach. But if you take a step back and look at the historical structure of what this thing is, the Jewish enterprise, and sum it up in one word, and that word is cheishek. It's an incredible thing. From this perspective, the whole thing is about cheishek. It's about love. It's about a love that transcends conditions. It's about a love that goes beyond earning or not earning, deserving or not deserving. It's about a love that goes beyond a checklist of different items that seem to constitute a very shallow relationship. Hashem says, I desire you. Ahavti eschem amar Hashem. I just love you. And even if you're not doing what you're supposed to be doing, and even if our relationship is not taking place at the highest level, which Be'ezus Hashem, our generation is waking up and we're going to bring it back to that place as a forerunner to the Geula Asida, which is already unfolding. But Hashem says it's irrelevant. I have cheishek for this people, for this spirit. So not because of quantity and not because of quality. Back inside, it's just cheishek without a reason. It's just because Hashem desires us. We find chen in his eyes, just like Esther did in the eyes, lahavdil, of Hamelech, which of course is a reference to Hashem, but over there is of course speaking about Achashverosh, where a chen avei al Hamelech sholei kedas. She wasn't deserving of coming before the king. She hadn't been called. 30 days. Terrible thing. And of course, Esther in the deeper Sefarim is symbolic of the whole Jewish nation, of the Shechina, of Am Yisrael, Knesset Yisrael. And each and every one of us at the end of time, when we're under threat of total extinction, we need to say to ourselves and give ourselves the chizuk, Shaloi Kedas, I'm not deserving. Our generation, like we mentioned earlier, is not the most impressive of generations. There have been many, many, many more righteous diarists than ours. Shaloi Kedas. But Achein Avoi El HaMelech makes no difference. Because the cheishek is there. The yearning is there. The desire is there. And even though, al pi, quote-unquote, halacha, we're not, it's like, how should we find it within ourselves? The presumptuousness, the azus, the brazenness to come before the king. Because I can't live without you, Rabbanu Shalom, even though I'm not in a place where I'm deserving of it. And guess what Hamelech does? We go back to, we mentioned this in previous year. He sticks out the sharbit. We said is Rabbi Yisrael Baal Shem Tov is this whole thing is his message, his energy. Hashem sent out a great light to the world, whole different way of thinking about Yiddishkeit. And Hashem says, cheishek, I'm bringing you back home. V'shavu banim l'gvulam. After the Holocaust that we're marking today, after a Shoah that was perhaps the greatest embodiment of the biblical curses, it's not for us to know what it was and what it isn't, but if you look at the Tochacha and you look at that, it's like, that looks super similar. And almost immediately after that, concurrent with it, Hashem is opening the gates back to Yerushalayim. Hashem is opening the gates back to Eretz Yisrael. And that story is just beginning to unfold. You know, it's the nature of our generation. We want everything so quickly that we think 70 years is like a long time. It's a blink of an eye and less than that. Against the backdrop of history, modern history, thousands of years, 70 years, it's a joke. Nothing started yet. This is the beginning of the beginning of the beginning. Now, of course, in a minute, Hashem could bring Achishena, everything could change. We'll be back in Eretz Yisrael with the Gula Shlema, but as a natural process, like Hashem is just beginning to show us His wonders. And that was right after the greatest expression of concealment, charon af. If there was ever a quote-unquote consequence for the way that we had been living in one way or another, even though it's difficult to talk about it as a consequence because the Holocaust is so much greater than our capacity to judge or to call it one thing or another. But we can all agree that it was charon af. We can all agree that there was an outpouring of terrible concealment of Hashem. Toch kedei, Hashem gives us the greatest kiss on our forehead. Hashem says, forget it. Cheishek. Cheishek. I have to share a medrash with you. Did want to start the sefer, we still will. At least the very beginning of it. I know but this is the way to do it properly, I think. I hope. I don't know. Just trying my best. I have to share a medrash with you. We're coming up now to Lag BaOmer, a couple of weeks. Lag BaOmer is the day of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, who was really the first rays of dawn of the light of the Geula. And he said that about himself. He said that about his sefer that was revealed many years later, the Sefer HaZohar, where he said, "B'sifra da yifkan bei min gelusa barachne." With this sefer, the Jewish nation is getting out of exile. And then the Arizal came and channeled that energy. We mentioned this in previous year. And then later on, the Baal Shem Tov, and then Rabbi Nachman, and different traditions, all drawing on that revelation of the Zohar Kodesh that really speaks about the pnimius of what it means to be a Jew, the relationship aspect, and highlights that in a way that no sefer ever highlighted. Throughout the corpus of Chazal, the love that Hashem has for us, the pride that Hashem takes in us, the way in which the whole of creation literally relies on our every choice, the power with which we are entrusted, etc. There's a Medrash Shir HaShirim. I'd heard it years ago, and I happened to take a Medrash off the shelf between Mincha Marav. I opened it up. This is the Medrash that I came upon. So I feel like it's particularly precious, like Hashem just gave it to me, a gift. I want to share it with you. And the Medrash says that there was a husband and a wife that were married for 10 years and couldn't have children. And it's a halachic sugya, but al pi dina de Mishnah, right, in the most literal sense, pure halacha says they need to part. They need to divorce. Because the ikr is perivirivya. The ikr is bringing children into the world, and if this particular couple, for one reason or another, is not having children, okay. So this couple came to Rashbi, to Reb Shimon Bar Yochai. And the couple said, we're learning Mishnayos. It's been 10 years. And what should we do? Have to divorce. And there are different understandings in the Mefarshim as to why exactly this is what Rabbi Shimon answered him. There's different ways of understanding what he meant. But Rashbi said the same way that you got married with a mishtav simcha, with an incredible feast, so the divorce also needs to, before you get divorced, a huge feast. A huge celebration. And again, there are many different understandings, explanations as to why he said that and what he meant. But kachava, this is just the medrash. They had a huge party. And at the party, she gave him lots of wine. And after the party was finished, she lifted him up, and she carried him to her in-laws' house, his father's house. And she laid him in a bed over there. In the morning he wakes up and he's not where he was, and he can't remember how he got here, and he was completely knocked out. He doesn't know what's going on. And he says to her, "How did I get here?" This is a medrash. I wish I had it in front of me. I could read it to you inside. It's such a beautiful lashon.
The door is stuck. Is anyone?
The door is stuck?
Yeah, like they're going. I mean, we don't know if we get out here.
We'll find a way, but just right now, in the middle of the... Sorry. So he asks her, how did I get here? What's going on? And she answers him. She said, last night, you told me that we're getting divorced now, but because of our great love, you're going to give me a gift to say you can take anything in the house. Take anything in the house and bring it, it was to her parents' house, not to her in-laws, I believe, and take it home. Anything. It's all yours. All of my property, whatever it is, a parting gift. Listen to the lashon of the medrash. She said to him, "Ein li chayfetz babayis yoser mimcha." I desire nothing more in this house than you. I took you. They came back to Reb Shimon Bar Yochai. They told him the story. And right then and there, and it's, again, difficult to understand every detail of the story, different approaches, he davened that they should have a child, and they had a child, and they stayed together. And the Medrash goes on to say that if this was true about one couple, this is the hanhaga that they had, I mean, a more romantic thing we can't imagine. It's mamash a love story. He said, then imagine if Am Yisrael would say that to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. What it means is, we've been married for many, many, many years, and Hashem is like, come on guys, produce something. Do something in the world. Let there be children from this relationship, meaning let there be fruits, let there be, and like we can't. We're barren as a nation. And kiviyachol, we come to HaKadosh Baruch Hu and we say, and this is the lashon of the midrash, Ein li chayfetz ba'olam yoser mimcha. It's like, you're right. Halachically, we're done, right? Because that's what it was. Shaloi kedas. Al pi halacha, this relationship was over. They didn't. Halacha said they had to part. But it was beyond the halacha. It was a relationship. It was a cheishek. And we say to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, you're right. I'm not deserving. And in accordance with everything that you said in the Torah, the relationship is severed. But what should I do? Ein l'chayfetz ba'olam yoser mimcha. I can't live without you. It's not a matter of a technical calculation. It's a matter of oxygen. I can't breathe without you. Rebbeinu da'al makayla. Ein l'chayfetz ba'olam yoser mimcha. I don't want anything. I want you. I fall into every shtus in the world. Okay, I'm trying. But if you want to know my chayfetz, if you want to know my essence, my innermost identity, if you want to know what gets me out of bed in the morning, if you want to know the basic lens through which I see the world, if you want to know how I think about myself when I look in the mirror, what do I see? What I'm about? I see this flickering flame that never dies. I see this. Ani l'doidi v'doidi li. Ein li chayfetz ba'olam yoser mimcha. I want you. I don't want anything else. So you can give me everything else in the world, but when it comes down to it, Ribbon Shalom, I'll take you again and again and again and again and again. If I had to choose to relinquish you and to have everything else in the world, or to take nothing from it and keep you, ein li chayfetz ba'olam yoser mimcha. This is the light of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. It couldn't have been any other Tana. That this was Rabbi Shimon's thing. Maybe this is what he always knew would happen. He set them up, so to speak. The Sharbet Hazav. Ki kemoy shemiskulas hachoshek ki amuat hamosag elav mechoshka yosa nechba ba'arev etzle meharbe mizulasai. Because of the intense desire of the choshek, of the one who's desiring, who has a relationship toward the other, the little bit that the other does, the little tiny expression of love. She's not the greatest poet in the world. She's not making up long, Romeo and Juliet, what do they call them? Sonoras? I don't know. Anyway, whatever, all these different kinds of things. But you know what she does? She leaves him one little post-it note with a heart on it, and maybe writes on the bottom, "Have a good day." Wow. So it's not the most eloquent thing, and it's not the greatest, but it's from the one that I desire. It's from the cheishek. So it's not relevant, the fact that, yes, you understand that there are far more poetic and expressive spouses in the world. You know that. But that's irrelevant. Because all the most eloquent poems coming from them don't shine a light to the infinite illumination, the sun of this little tiny post-it note that came from him, or that came from her. Because it's an inyan of cheishek. It's not an inyan of intellectual, deliberation. Kain Hashem Yisbarach. It's the same way by Hashem. He says a very deep thing here. Ma'at havoida hamagia lav mi'umi Yisrael. The little bit that we are able as a nation to give him, the little bit, and we're all trying our best. It's a very difficult time we're living through now. Very confusing time. Challenging time. Yoser nechshav etzloi is more precious to him and beloved. Meharbe mi'uma acheres, mikol hu'umais, from everything that all the other nations can give him. And it's not chas v'shalom because he looks down on them, and it's not chas v'shalom because they're better off. We are better off than they are, or certainly chas v'shalom, not that they're worse than we are. On the contrary, we already said that we're the ma'at mikol ha'anim, we're the least impressive, and maybe we have the worst midas, in our essence, so to speak. We've established that already. This is not because of us. But if you want to know about from Hashem's perspective, we're his beloved. That's just the way it is. That is just the way it is. And it's not a commentary on every other man in the world just because this person happens to have chosen one person as their spouse. Doesn't mean that everybody else is inferior. It's just they were not her chassan. And it's not a commentary on every other girl in the world, because this person chose this particular girl to be his kala. Not a commentary on them. But this is just the way it is. And the reason that this is the way it is in our interpersonal relationships as human beings is because it is mushrash, it is rooted in the hanhaga, in the experience of the Ein Sof, of the Infinite One. And we are his bride. We are his kala. We are his nechshak. We are the one that he desires. And we are the ones that he chose to bring his torch of sweetness and goodness and emes to the nations, so that they too could enter into a relationship, so that they too could taste of the sweetness that we were gifted. We were gifted, not because we earned it, but because mitzad Hashem, like we say, aseh leman chaim lo lemanenu, we don't deserve it. Do it for you. Do it because you're in love with us. The whole sefer is going to be based on this premise. Sometimes I have conversations with people who think that I make a mistake in talking very lofty or very abstract. I'm not the kind of person that speaks about like the practical day-to-day, the tachlis, the details. And I do. I'm guilty as charged. I speak very big, very high, very abstract maybe. But I think that if we don't have what we call, let's say, existential clarity, if we don't have the biggest ideas clearly defined, then like I said, we can work on all of the smaller things piecemeal by piecemeal. We'll have a chabur on kas, let's say. We'll have a chabur on shalom bayis. And we can work on all of those different specific things, but if they're not rooted in a fundamental existential clarity of what we are as a people and who we are as individuals on the deepest level, it's going to be lacking. And it's not going to be enough for our dor, for our people, for our generation. Certainly not the youth. It's not going to be enough. And I'm super strong about this. I can't tell you, I'm like super clear on the necessity to bring this way of thinking and understanding to every Jew in the world. And to start with the big ideas. And then within that context, we can speak about everything, and whatever we speak about within that context, it shines. It's like it's lit up with a brand new illumination. Brand new. Okay, 5 minutes left. Oh, not really. We did start 5 minutes late. Can we just jump into the first paragraph? Mamish, just to get a taste of let Rav Kluger speak a little bit in his own sefer. We'll just do until Os Aleph, okay? What a beautiful, beautiful sefer that there are so many beginnings. It's like we haven't begun yet. Like we still haven't begun. We did the introduction, and we did the introduction to chapter 1, and now we're doing the introduction within chapter 1. Excellent. Hisbodedus no ada la Yichud shalem b'mashpil l'mekabel. Hisbodedus is all about bringing unity, oneness between the mashpia, which is Hashem, the giver, l'mekabel, and the one that's receiving. Behischabros muchletes LaHashem Yisbarach, to bring about, to facilitate, to allow us to taste and experience an absolute bond with Hashem. The first thing to understand, this will not happen at once. We don't jump into to the most intense aspect of a relationship. It's like dating. You build it up, layer after layer, level after level. There's an order for prayer. We begin first with praise, then we move into asking. There's a seder. There are levels, layers. The same thing applies when it comes to personal prayer. There's a very specific set order in the way that we're supposed to be thinking, and then the way that we're supposed to be speaking. V'derech mashal, and here he brings it back to the mashal with Esther Amalka, L'nishmas Yisrael. We keep on going back to Purim, so it's also very Geula oriented. Purim, right? Again, she is the symbol for all Jewish people. When she wants to accomplish by Hashem, like parts of take of Ladaber. I'm sorry, by Achashverosh, she didn't just immediately burst into the throne room and right away in the first thing she asks to do away with Haman's decree. No, Ela biksha suda achas. Right? First she said, come to a suda. And then at the suda, Achashverosh expressed that he is on good terms with her at Chatzi Amalchus. Like we said, right? And he already stuck the scepter toward her. And then after the first suda, and then the second suda, then it came to the right moment where she was able to cry out, Nafshi b'she'elasi ba'ami b'vakashasi, give me my soul, give me my nation, which of course is the same thing. In every aspect throughout life of unity, of bond, of relationship. Just like conversations that you want to have with a relative. You don't get to the intensity of the bond, of the true relationship, or even the nature of what, let's say you want to have a tough conversation. You don't just start right away. First, there's small talk, and that's the way that relationships work. Bardas, an intelligent person, a person who's intelligent doesn't rush things. They allow themselves to engage with the preliminary stages of the relationship with yishavadas, with a settled mind, knowing that we'll get to talk about what we want to talk about, but ease into it, patience. Even though the relationship isn't at its most intense, you don't jump into a date with the most intense diburim, and gotta go slow. Gotta build a relationship step after step. To know that things go in a certain order. And the same is true as we're going to now learn, as Hashem, next week, when the Olam HaRuchni HaPnimi, in the interior spiritual world that all of us are fostering within ourselves, which is the world, the portion, the lot of the mitboded, of the one who engages in personal prayer with Hashem. The first thing to know is that there's an order. Ulahamin, to know and to believe, you go step after step. And first we're going to talk about ways of thinking that enable us to enter into the energy of hisbodedus, very much based on what we just learned now from the sefer Ikrim of cheishek. And then la'at la'at ala tachlis haritzua. Then he says, "B'perek zeh," in this first chapter, ba'im ikri advarim b'tamsis. We're just going to give you the sort of a summary or an overview of this process. V'archavasan lahalon be'emshach haprakim. And then as the prakim unfold, we're going to get into what the different elements of each stage are, and we're going to learn how to do this thing called hisbodedus, which would seem to be so natural and easy. Just speak to Hashem, but we're going to learn that there are different levels of the relationship and the intensity, so that we can really maximize our experience. Okay, Chaim, thank you guys so much for coming. I'm so happy that we're able to continue the journey together, and wishing everybody an amazing week. Questions? Yes. It is most fundamentally our ani, and our neshama is us. Hashem doesn't give us our neshama. Sometimes, like the Baal Tanya says, in a certain sense, if a person is more gashmi oriented and vis-a-vis their current perspective, we call the neshama given to us. That's why we say Elokai neshama shenasata bi, right? Hashem, the neshama that you gave to me, but that's not really the truth. That's just it's like a way of being humble. We say in the morning, I am so physically oriented that ki'ilu, I'm my body. That's not the truth. We are our neshama. And the neshama that we have as individuals is really one neshama that's called Knesset Yisrael. That's called the Jewish nation. And that energy is part of all of humanity, which is in even more klalius, right? In even more general structure of revelation in the world, the human species. Okay, so it's absolutely one. Mamish one. It's synonymous.